Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Canine Cannibalism. Today, we are going to be taking a look at The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Before we begin, I am. I've changed some things to try to negate some of the visual static on the camera that I'm using. I think it might just be the camera at this point because there's still visual static. It's less noticeable now that I've made my lighting better and made it so that I'm recording the entire frame, which obviously looks a little weird because these blankets that I'm using don't go down to the floor. Um, I'm gonna try to get. Let me. Probably also doesn't help that the cord that I'm using doesn't seem to fit into the USB-C connection very well. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to get, or I'm going to get rather, curtains that will go all the way around my desk, and then it won't look weird. Um, Especially since this is like almost see-through at this point because of the plant lights I have behind me, so there's not even really a point for me to have them up. What else? What else was I gonna say? Using new audio editing for this video and probably the next one as well. Let me know if it sounds weird. I've noticed that my videos are kind of quiet. Um, so I'm going to try to boost the audio and do some different stuff with compression to make it easier for me to edit. So yeah, if it sounds weird, let me know. I'll be listening to it myself a lot, but there's a chance that it's all fucked. So just let me know. Also going to be trying to speak at a more consistent level so that I don't have random fucking peaks. We'll see how it goes. Okay, we're looking at The Road. This book is 287 pages. There are no chapters. It's broken up in like paragraphs, kind of. It's very, very interesting. I will give you a quick blurb. A man and a boy travel across very post-apocalyptic America, hoping to reach the coast and head south to survive the upcoming winter. On the road, they meet a host of the remnant people who still walk the earth. That's the book. I love this book. I've read this, specifically this copy. This is the fourth time I'm reading it. I love this book. I have mentioned this book probably 10, 20 times throughout all of the videos that I've made. I fucking love it. It is by far my favorite book. I love the prose. I love the we'll get into it. We'll get into it. I got to stop myself. We are going to be looking at the book. We're going to be talking about the graphic novel adaptation, and we're going to be talking about the movie a little bit. No content sample for this video. There's not really anything that would go on my content sample. There's death, and that's pretty much the entirety of it. There's lots of mentions of things like cannibalism and rape, and suicide, but there's very little actual disturbing stuff in the book like that. The book itself is very disturbing. Well, again, we will get into it. We're gonna get into a review now, okay? And you're just gonna have to bear with me while I suck this book's cock, all right? Because I fucking love this shit. I love it. Review time. So, the prose in this book is unlike anything I have ever read. It is wonderful. I cannot overstate how absolutely immaculate the prose is in this book. It there's really no way to put it into words. It's just beautiful. And from what I know about McCarthy's other works, they tend to be like that. I'm reading Blood Meridian next, and I'm very much looking forward to that. It is just unlike anything I've read in terms of how poetic it is, and it's just the juxtaposition of this very archaic feeling, flowy, poetic prose with death and suicide and like modern things, like just random like mentions of modern things like Coca-Cola and semi trucks, motorcycle rear view mirrors or motorcycle mirrors, that kind of thing. Like it's very, It's very interesting, and it's it beautiful. This book won a Pulitzer Prize. Um, I've I've also mentioned that probably 10 times whenever I'm comparing something to this book. It's not Pulitzer Prize winning. Well, in this case, it very much is Pulitzer Prize winning. The prose is some of the most beautiful English that I've ever read in my life. Bar none, bar nothing. In this book, there is a lot that is left to reader interpretation. It allows you to come to your own conclusions. And I have complained about that in the past with other books, like, say, Darkness on the Edge of Town. In this case, it is done very well. There's little tidbits that are given out here and there that allow you to form a fuller narrative in your head. And it's done very well, is really the best way I can put it. It is done in a way that is not detrimental to the story as a whole, but allows you to jump off into your own interpretation of the story and doesn't just leave things out for the sake of leaving them out, which is like in Lovecraftian horror, where it's just we're just gonna call this something and then not explain it because it's a horror beyond comprehension. This is not that. This is leaving things out to allow you to have a fuller interpretation of the book, given what you think about it. Um, I guess a better way to put this is it feels a lot of times in books like Darkness on the Edge of Town that the writer doesn't even know the answers to these things. Like they don't know what the creature actually is, how it works. They just kind of are like, well, it's beyond comprehension, so it's beyond comprehension. In this, it very much seems like the writer has a very clear idea of the story as a whole. He is just leaving things out to allow you to make your own conclusions. Moving on from that. So the dialogue in this book is formatted in a very odd way. There's no dialogue punctuation. There's no like quotation marks, that kind of thing. I don't even think there's apostrophes for contractions and stuff, if I remember correctly. It's very bare bones when it comes to its punctuation in general. But the dialogue is formatted where there's no quotation marks. It's just someone speaks, and then on the next line someone else speaks, and then on the next line someone else speaks. It creates this very interesting effect because the book is told from the perspective of a man, and it's mostly all told from his head, like a not exactly stream of consciousness, but he's narrating the book. We spend a lot of time with his thoughts and what he's thinking, and it creates a very interesting effect where sometimes you can't tell if he is speaking or he is thinking something, especially on like the last line. So he'll talk to his son, and then it'll go back to his son saying something to him, and then he'll say something else, and then his son will say something, and then the last line, which is supposed to be him, you can't really tell if that's just him thinking or if he's actually saying something, and it's a very interesting effect. It also creates an effect in certain instances where it's kind of difficult to tell who is speaking. Not necessarily in a detrimental way. It's just, again, it's a very, very interesting stylistic choice, and I do, for the most part, enjoy it. It's very simplistic, and I think that's kind of the point, is it a lot of the stuff in the book doesn't matter. That's kind of the main point of things. It doesn't matter how long it's taking it for them to walk it across the country. It doesn't matter what their names are. It doesn't matter what caused the apocalypse in the first place. It doesn't matter. The point is that a lot of things just don't matter. And so the way that the dialogue is formatted gets across a very simplistic communication style where they're just like, I say this, you have a question, I answer it, okay, okay. A lot of the dialogue ends with the boy saying okay and then the man saying okay. It's very simplistic. I think it gets across the effect that was intended, which is simplicity. But I just also enjoy the stylistic choice. The road is also very extended metaphor heavy. So, for example, the boy is like kind of a Christ figure, and there's a lot of I don't know that allusion is the right term, but they allude a lot to him being like a god or a Christ-like figure. There's like light behind him at one point from the man's point of view. There's he calls him like the last god or something like that. It's very biblical in a sense. He is the embodiment of hope in this hopeless world. There's also like they're on the road walking, and they come across people who are burned into the road, and the boy's like, why couldn't they leave the road? And the father's like, because everything around them was on fire. So a metaphor for them walking down the road, and it's like the only place they can go, kind of. There's a wind-up toy at one point that's moving without its spinner turning, so I took that as like a metaphor for the man and the boy just walking forward, not really knowing where they're going, but just walking. It's a lot of stuff like that, just references to the man and the boy just kind of walking and having nowhere else to go. There's what I interpreted as a very loose metaphor for the apocalypse, like what caused the apocalypse, possibly. I'll get into it probably after the plot summary because that's a little spoiler heavy. It's a lot of stuff like that. It's a lot of just long, very extended metaphors to the situation that the man and the boy are in, to the fact that the boy is a Christ-like figure, that kind of thing. And the book is very full. Those are like just two examples of things that I picked up on, and then there's a fuck ton more throughout the book. Okay, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's very metaphor heavy. It's very figurative. If you read it in a very metaphorical mindset, I think you can get a lot out of it. I know that sounds like really like art school pretentious. If you look at a Jackson Pollock with a lot of with all of the emotions swirling on around in your head, then you'll get a lot out of a Jackson Pollock painting. Like, I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to say that if you read it looking for these metaphors, I think it paints a much larger picture. It allows you to fill in gaps in the story. That is it for our pre-summary review. We are going to get into our ratings now. If you are unfamiliar with this, I rate different aspects of a book with ratings. I got to figure out a better way to say this because I think every time I introduce the rating system, it comes off as a tautology, and I'm really not trying to do that. Certain aspects of book give ratings in order to rate book as whole. So this first set of ratings is on a scale from 0 to 10, 5 being completely mid, completely mediocre, nothing wrong with that, or I guess not mediocre because mediocre has a slightly negative connotation. It's completely mid. Nothing wrong with it. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just completely there. 10 being the best of all time, 1 or 0 being the worst of all time, okay? So, for your plot and your plot direction for this book, it's a 10. I could not foresee a better way to write this story. There is not a single time I read something and was like, I don't know why the fuck the author did that. It is bar actual perfection. I don't know how you could make this book, the story in this book, better. I just do not. The tone is an 8. It's very hopeless. The book is completely filled with despair. There's nothing worth really living for in the book, and except for the child. And the child is the embodiment of hope and is the reason that the man keeps going. And I think that tone of just absolute despair, except for the boy, it comes across very well in the writing. Also, just the fear in certain points jumps out of the text at you. It's the tone throughout is very well written. For characters and character development, it's a 9. We spend almost the entire book with the man, developing the man. I wish there was a little more development of the boy's character, but there's enough that he's a very fleshed out character by the end. Even just with his conversations with the man, it's very clear what kind of person he is in this world. And the man, I mean, we know like the back of our hands by the end of the writing. So even some of the minor characters, the bad guys and stuff, we get to know kind of who they are in the brief instances where we interact with them. Grammar and typos, it's going to be an 8 in this instance. Normally the highest you can really get is like a 5. That's like perfectly fine uses of grammar, nothing that's really weird, and then also no typos. The words that McCarthy uses in this book, his writing is incredibly verbose, but not in an overly pretentious way where he's just using like indubitably or something like that constantly, or words like that constantly. He uses very specific vocabulary to kind of get across what he's trying to get across. So, for example, and I always respect this whenever I'm reading a book, instead of trying to describe a specific, like here's a really good example. There's a shopping cart. The man and the boy carry a shopping cart or push a shopping cart. And instead of using odd or kind of abstract terms to describe like the anatomy of the shopping cart. He uses the actual like anatomical terms for different pieces of the shopping cart. And I always very much respect that because you have to do some research to be able to do that. And it comes across like like it's just second nature. Like the people in the book also know what those terms are, and they're very well versed in these things, and it makes the whole book seem fuller and more researched and well. This is really hard to explain. It just comes across like you know what you're talking about, and that you're using these pieces of vocabulary and grammar that people are not so much familiar with or very often familiar with to flesh out the character's understanding. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's just an example. He uses a lot of words that I've never seen before. I remember the first time I read this book, I was like, I want to say 14 or 15. I didn't know what the word catamite meant. I didn't know what the word shill meant. Obviously, now I know what those words mean, but this book, even reading it a fourth time, has taught me a lot of new vocabulary. It's like discoused. I believe I learned that the last time I read it. The word discoused. It's again, it doesn't feel overly pretentious, but it is very verbose. There's a lot of very specific vocabulary for specific situations, specific anatomy for different things. So it seems like the characters are very well read and researched, and it seems like the writer is very well read and researched. That's kind of the effect that comes across from this. Dialogue, I've already talked about that at length. I'm just going to say that it's a 7. The prose, I've already talked about that at length as well. It's a 10, but just adding on the grammar thing, the fact that it'll makes the his choice of grammar and then the very specific grammar makes the characters feel more fleshed out and well read. It's another thing on top of that, just adding things to the pile of why the fuck this prose is like the best I've ever read. It's everything in this book feels intentional. The grammar, the structure, the way that the sentences flow, it all feels very, very intentional, as if he's trying to get across a very specific point with each word that he writes. That sounds very, very art schooly. I apologize, but I really don't know what other way to put this. Personal enjoyment, if you couldn't tell already, it's going to be a 10. It is my favorite book. I don't think I will ever read a book that I like more than this one. Just the effect that this had on me the first time I read it. So, story time. Funny enough, right? Funnily enough, when I was younger, I was a very well-read child, and my parents, the rule was they would let me watch a movie if I read the book first. So I watched like the new It when it came out when I was like 12 or 13 because I'd already read the book, right? I was a very, very well-read child. I still consider myself to be decently well-read, and that was the rule in the household, okay? Whether that was always such a very good rule for my parents to have, I'm who I am now because of it, but I read this book the first time in 3 or 4 hours because I desperately wanted to watch the movie. And in doing so, I didn't really get to experience the book the way that I would when I read it the second time. And then I watched the movie and I was completely underwhelmed. So it's just funny that I read this book. This book was the vegetables to get to my dessert, and the book ended up being the dessert. The vegetables ended up being the dessert in this case. I've always found that funny, considering that I love the book far more than I could ever love any other singular piece of media ever. So, your next two ratings are your disturbing factor and your gross out factor. These are on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being the least disturbing, the least gross, 10 being the most disturbing, the most gross. For The Road, the disturbing factor is going to be a 6. It's pretty disturbing. I think I've already touched on, there's lots of mentions of suicide, child suicide, death, cannibalism, rape. The whole thing has an undertone of just complete despair and death, really. Just everything is dead. So it's a very disturbing book. Your gross out factor is going to be a 0. There's nothing gross in this book. I mean, the man and the boy are vagrants and don't wash themselves, but there's nothing actually like gross in this book, so it's a 0. And now that our ratings are out of the way, we are going to jump into a plot summary of the book. So, heavy spoiler warning, plot summary. I am going to spoil to you some of the major plot points of the book. Now, I'm going to touch on this right away. This book is not told in chronological order. It starts in the post-apocalypse, and then we get flashbacks and stuff, very, very loose flashbacks that may or may not be true, that kind of thing, telling us what may or may not have happened in the past. I am telling it in chronological order. It's just easier for me to tell it that way, okay, than tell you, oh yeah, they walked across this state, and then also there was a flashback here that talked about the start of the calamity. Like, it's just easier for me to start with the start of the calamity and then go forward, so I'm going to be doing that. Also, again, I've already said this, much of the work is left to reader interpretation. I am going to be telling you mine. If you read this book, aside from the fact that I always purposefully leave out details or change certain details so that if you were to read the book, you would have your own, you would form your own opinion on it. You would have your very own experience about it. If you were to read this book, I can guarantee you will have a different experience. You will interpret things differently than I did. That's just the nature of the work. So I can promise you, even if you listened to my full interpretation, you will have a different experience. I would also actually encourage you, if you've already read this book, to listen to my interpretation. Maybe it will fill in some blanks for you, or maybe you'll disagree with me. Maybe you'll form your own, a different interpretation based on what I say. There are some things that I'm going to tell you that I don't even truly fully believe, and maybe I'll touch on them when we get to them, but there's a few, so maybe not all of them. Also, before I begin, I'm going to try to slightly impart some of the prose on you in the way that I recount this. So if it sounds a little flowy and weird, that's me trying my best to get across kind of the feel of the book. I digress. Let me begin. One morning, on no day in particular, maybe even no day at all, the clocks stop at 1:17 a.m. There is a long sheer of light on the horizon, followed by a series of low concussions. The man goes to the bathroom of his house, and the power is already gone. He fills the bath with water. Later, as cities burn in the distance, he helps his pregnant wife give birth to a baby boy in their kitchen. The man, the woman, and their son become 3 of the myriad pilgrims or refugees, towing around belongings in carts and suitcases, wrapped in rags, their faces masked and their eyes goggled so as to stave off the falling ash. Forests and cities and towns and houses and people burn to nothing. Animals of all species face extinction. Land plants die and crumble to dust. The sun is blotted out by gray clouds that never lift, and the nights are moonless and black as pitch. When it snows, the snow is gray. When it rains, the water is tainted with ash. It is cold and grows colder. It is dark and grows darker. Once, in the early years, the man wakes to hear a flock of birds flying aimlessly overhead. He wishes them well, and he never hears them again. Sometime later, the immolated and nearly dead begin to appear along stretches of roadway, smoldering in their clothes. Others come along to help them, and within a year the blood cults in their many sects are born. Bale fires burning on the high hills, bull drums sounding in the low valleys, the screams of the damned and their murdered bodies strung up and speared with stakes. Stores of food begin to run out. Cannibalism becomes prevalent. Cannibalism is the great fear. The world is soon populated by godless men who would rape and eat your child in front of your eyes. The road is taken over by road agents and marauders, thieves and murderers and cannibals and rapists. Much later, the woman gives up. She pleads with the man to let her take their son with her. He is steadfast. She wanders alone into the dark night and takes her life with a piece of sharpened obsidian. Intermittently starving and in constant fear, the man and the boy go on as the world continues to die. Sometime later, the blood cults have all but burnt out, the communes have all but fallen, the pilgrims are all but dead, and the road agents and marauders have all but consumed each other. As the world grows colder and darker, the man concedes that they will not live another winter as far north as they are. He and the boy begin moving southward toward the coast. Later, while camped on the side of the road, they are come upon by a pack of road agents. The man and the boy run into the woods before they are spotted. While peeking over the lip of a ditch, the man locks eyes with one of the road agents, a younger road rat attempting to use the bathroom away from his group. The rat rushes the boy and holds him at knife point. The man shoots him. He and the boy run, narrowly escaping. The man is dying and has been for some time. He coughs often, spitting up blood. He becomes weaker as he goes. Later, the man and the boy come across the killing field remnant of a war between 2 groups. That night, the victors pass them on the road, a sizable bunch of marauders on a warpath, towing women and catamites and their innumerable spoils. Later, and definitively starving now, the man and boy come upon a house. Delirious, the man doesn't see the pile of shoes and clothes in the foyer, nor does he see the fresh fire pit in the backyard. He only sees a trapdoor in a back room. Convinced that the trapdoor might lead to a store of food, he breaks the lock and enters. Inside, he and the boy find a collection of human livestock, filthy and naked, some sporting charred stumps for limbs where meat was taken. The man and boy run. They manage to get away just as the homeowners return. They hide in the nearby woods, the man holding the gun to his son's head in case they are found, as screams emanate from the house throughout the night. Later, they come upon an old hidden bunker. Inside, they find stores of everything they need. They leave after a few days. Later, 3 men step into the road before them. The man brandishes the gun and the 3 men step aside. Later, the 3 men pass the man and boy, a very pregnant woman towing behind them. The man and boy come upon the travelers' camp, finding a headless infant spitted over the fire. The man and boy arrive at the coast of the Grey Sea. The man loots a shipwreck and comes up with a sizable amount of food. The boy gets very ill and nearly dies. As the man and boy leave the coastal town, the man is shot in the leg by a bowman in a window. He kills the bowman and stitches his wound. As they travel farther, the man grows weaker until one day he dies. The boy is approached soon after by a different man, a scarred veteran of old skirmishes. At least that's what the boy calls him. The man asks the boy if he would like to come with him. The boy questions him. The man says that he is one of the good guys and that he also has children, a girl and a boy. The boy leaves with the man. And that is the end of the book. Now, let's do some really quick post-summary review and then we'll get into the next part of this video. As I said, it doesn't matter how the apocalypse is caused. That's the point, is that none of it really matters. I always like to think that it's like a comet or a meteor. I've done a lot of deep dives into like comets or meteors crashing into the earth, or the meteor that killed the dinosaurs, more so, like causing global firestorms that burned everything, setting off volcanic eruptions. I will talk about the snakes. There is a scene where the man recounts how, as a boy, he watched a group of men unearth a burrow of, I believe they're garter snakes or rat snakes or something, and then subsequently burn them all alive. And I took that as the snakes are the people before the calamity, just going about whatever the fuck they're doing. And the men are either the universe as a whole. There's a lot of talk throughout the book about the uncaring universe and the fact that the earth continues to spin around the uncaring sun that can't even blot through the clouds, that kind of thing. There's a lot of talk about that. So the men could either represent powerful men who caused or induced a nuclear war, or it could just represent the universe as a whole, the uncaring universe just throwing a meteor at the earth and not caring about what happens. So now that we are done with the book, we are going to get into the graphic novel. Right away, not as good as the book, but let's actually get into it a little bit. Okay? This graphic novel is drawn by, and I believe also written by, Manu Larcenet. Larcenet? Probably Larcenet. Manu Larcenet. Manu Larcenet. Yeah, that sounds about right. Not as good as the book. Not even close. Let's just start off very simple, okay? Whoever wrote the dust cover blurb here, I don't know if they've read the book, because it's just full of details that are just not right. For example, I believe here there is, among the survivors, a father and his son wander on a solitary dirt road. I would question if that was AI generated if I didn't already know that this came out before that was a prevalent thing. Like it's not dirt, even remotely. I don't think there's a single time they walk on a dirt road. And that's just one example. There's, I believe, others in that section that are odd, to say the least. We're going to talk about dialogue now. It is a complete bastardization of the communication between the man and the boy that you can find in the book. I'm just going to continue with this. If I get off on a tangent, I'm never going to be able to stop myself because it pissed me off. Most of the dialogue, which is original to the graphic novel, is written almost like the writer doesn't speak much English and doesn't know how people would say something to one another. The man randomly uses like the term "I beg your pardon" to the boy, which if you read the book is something that he, at least in my opinion, would never say. And then I don't remember the other phrase, but he uses another phrase twice that's kind of similar to that in style, and it's like it's very archaic British almost. It seems it's very jarring when you read it. Another thing, very little of the dialogue resembles the original, except for the parts that are directly lifted from the book. So again, all there are a few lines, and I was going line by line with the dialogue in this book, like, oh yeah, that matches, that seems about right. What the fuck is this? Oh yeah, that matches, that seems about right. That's directly lifted from the book. That's directly lifted from the book. What the fuck is this? Because it's the most. If you are writing a graphic novel, here are the two most important things, right? Especially in adaptation: the art, which is beautiful. I will touch on that later, and the dialogue. And this is completely fucked. It's completely fucked. Not only is it completely unoriginal, not only is it completely disrespectful to the book that it stems from, in that it's a completely different style at certain points, aside from the parts that are almost directly lifted from the book, but it also is like not even how people who speak English regularly would talk to one another. And it's not like the language has degraded and the author of the graphic novel is trying to take their own spin on how the language would have degraded over time, especially with a man and a boy limited in the man's original knowledge of the English language. It doesn't seem like that. It just seems like the person who wrote it doesn't know how people who speak English regularly speak to each other. Continuing. Most of the details in the original book are thought, not spoken. Okay, so I've already said that, I think. But I would almost guarantee that the main audience for an adaptation like this consists of people who have already read the original book. So it's really just clunky to have. Best example of this, okay? The original book. We are introduced to the idea of blood cults in I believe, I can actually find the line. It's, I believe, the first thing that I took note of. Yeah, no more balefires on the distant ridges. He thought the blood cults must have all consumed one another. That is a thought that the man has in the book, right? That is a thought about the blood cults, and then he has a flashback explaining them more. In the graphic novel, him and the boy just have a 2-line conversation about like, wow, I think the blood cults have all consumed one another. Yeah. Do you remember the screams? Yeah, I do. It was terrible. Like, again, I guarantee you the main audience for an adaptation of The Road is people who have read the book already, because who the fuck would just pick this up randomly if you haven't read the original book? I do not foresee that happening. Maybe it does. I do not foresee it happening. Okay? So for you to just include clunky dialogue loosely explaining something that is specifically said in this book. And again, it's almost like the author lifted specific passages from the book and just turned them into dialogue. There are also not, okay, so, God, it's already irking me just talking about it. Continuing with the dialogue, okay? Those lines that I just referred to, like with the blood cult stuff, it's very expository, right? Like, again, seems like you don't really know how people conversate, okay? Even not just in English, in general. It's very expository, right? It's like the new Avatar show on Netflix, the newer Avatar show on Netflix, okay? Very expository. There are also similarly clunky expository lines about stuff that's not even touched on in the book. So it's not like the author is trying to fill in stuff that happened in the original book. They're just filling in their own headcanon, which is fine. I really do appreciate artistic liberty when you're doing an adaptation like this, and I will touch on that, trust me. But there's a line talking about like the in the graphic novel, there's a weird light in the distance across the horizon, and the boy asks what the light is, and the man explains that he thinks that it's very big fires far off in the distance. I don't think that's touched on in the book. When I read that, it seemed like I had read something like that before, but I'm pretty sure that's not mentioned in the book, nor is it mentioned in the movie. But it seems the way that it is said, the way that the conversation happens is so clunky and expository. There's another scene with like the man explaining like to the son about like the muddy ash that he's pushing the cart through and how it makes it like harder to push. And it's so like, again, that's not a thing that's touched on in the book. It's touched on how it's difficult to push the cart through the snow and everything. But this is a very specific thing that's almost like the author of the graphic novel's headcanon. And it is explained in the most clunky way you could possibly imagine. I believe that's it for the dialogue. Overall, personally, I think that this book could have benefited severely from some narration boxes. For example, like in the movie. Now, they're not narration boxes in the movie, but there are scenes of narration in the movie that are very faithful to the original, to the source material. They are just lines lifted directly from the book and spliced together from different parts of the book to better explain the world as a whole. And it is done very well in the movie. And I feel like some narration boxes, which is a totally fine thing to do in a graphic novel, I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've read a graphic novel or a comic book series that doesn't have some form of narration box in it. Off the top of my head, The Walking Dead. And I can't think of another one. Because thought, uh, personal thought is such an important part of a work of literature that even when you're adapting it to something like a graphic novel, those are still important things to be able to get across to the reader. So, for example, the blood cults. That could have been a narration box similar to how the movie explains certain things like that. Also, in regards to the dialogue, 90% of it could have been removed because there is so little dialogue in the original book. So little. Again, I would assume most of the people reading The Road have already read the book. So you could have taken an as little as possible mentality to the dialogue and let the reader fill in the gaps. Obviously, for the 1 in a million first time reader of The Road who's going to pick up the graphic novel before they pick up the actual novel, leave in some dialogue to just fill in some blanks, but 90% of it probably could have been cut out and it would have had zero effect on the story, even for somebody who's just reading, whose introduction to The Road is the graphic novel. A couple of nitpicks. There's a guy in the book who they come across who the father claims is struck by lightning. I personally just think he almost burned to death in a fire. It would be very odd for him to just randomly be struck by lightning. I'm not saying it's not possible and that's not what the author intended to be the truth, but I personally like to think that it's just a guy who burned in the fires and maybe the father is lying to the boy so that the boy thinks that it's more unlikely that they would also burn in the fires. I don't know. That's more of a reach and like a personal headcanon. But the guy that's struck by lightning doesn't even look burned in the graphic novel. He just looks like a sick dude. So yeah, that was a very odd artistic direction. And then there are a couple of scenes, and the movie has the same issue, where there are things like boots left in the street. And if you've read the novel, you'll know how insane that is, that places that have been completely ransacked would have random boots left, considering the shoes are like a big part of what the man and the boy look for and and a big focus of like a character when they come across a character, what their shoes look like. It's a very common, a very persistent motif throughout the novel. So for there to be what seem to be functioning shoes in certain scenes in the graphic novel just seems like did you read the book? I don't know. That's it for my complaints, I believe. We're gonna get into the good things. The art is wonderful. The art is beautiful. It's similar to how I feel about the movie. It's just it encapsulates the gray, despair-ridden world in a very beautiful manner. Very beautiful, I don't know what they call them, shots, panels, I guess, of ash and billowing smoke and the man and the boy walking across a mostly gray countryside. It's very hard to do a lot with the color gray, but I think this artist does a very good job with it. I really do appreciate some of the artistic liberties. For one, there is a scene that in the book where the boy comes across, or the boy and the man, I guess, come across 3 bodies hanging in a barn. And it's not really expressly said whether they committed suicide or what happened, right? In the movie, the movie interpretation has them having committed suicide. In this book, in the graphic novel, they seem to have their feet bound, their hands and feet bound. So artistic liberty there. It's very clearly not consensual death. And then also when they come across the killing field, which I interpret to be the remnant of a war between 2 groups, it's much more practical and more of a warning in the original novel. It's much more like there are heads on spikes and there's guts on the ground where people were field dressed, right? It's much more practical. And then in the graphic novel, when the man comes across it, it's almost like a ritual, like what I would almost imagine the blood cults to kind of be like, but I don't think they're supposed to be the blood cults, a blood cult related thing. but it's very ritualistic. The heads are like all shrunken, and I mean that's touched on slightly in the book, but the heads are all like shrunken and in weird shapes and have specific pieces of them carved out, and there's like little trinkets wrapped around their hair, and they're all tied together in weird positions. It's very interesting. And again, the book does kind of touch on that, but again, it's still in my head in the novel, it's more just a warning, and in the graphic novel, it's more like a ritual for good luck or something. I found that to be a very, very interesting interpretation that I enjoyed. I like how the boy, and I think I already touched on the fact that I wish the boy was kind of fleshed out more in the graphic novel, because you can see him. He's much more active. He's a much more active participant in everything. There are certain scenes in the novel where the boy is like helping push or pull the cart or whatever, but it's barely touched on because there's so much happening and it's over such a long period of time. Seeing the boy push and pull the cart in the graphic novel and be an active participant, actively looking for food in a grocery store, that kind of thing, it's wonderful. I really, really did enjoy that aspect. The scene with the human livestock in the graphic novel is completely different, and it omits a lot of the despair that came with the novel. And I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, because on one hand, I always like it when a author takes their own interpretation of something and changes it for a graphic novel adaptation or a director for a movie, that kind of thing. But it is completely different. Like there's very little tension, and there's very little tension throughout the graphic novel as a whole. It's much more just straight across the board until the ending. And I don't know if I like that very much. I can't say that it's necessarily extremely negative, because it is just a different take on the original novel, but that is a big difference. The ending, I know I said I was done with bad things. And again, I don't necessarily, this is all in like a really gray area for me. Gray, haha. The ending of the book, it's up to reader interpretation. Okay. He goes off with the veteran. That's what in the fandom, that's what I've heard him referred to as, because that's what the boy calls him, a veteran of old skirmishes or whatever. He's the veteran. The boy goes off with the veteran, and it's kind of unclear what happens after that. Is the man lying? Does he actually go off and be with this man and his children? There's a paragraph right after he goes off with the man that's about him running into the arms of a woman, and you could interpret that as he runs off and the man has a wife and he goes into the arms of the woman and she hugs him. I kind of interpret that as that's his mother in heaven, and he's going up to her and giving her a hug. And then a lot of the dialogue that is shared between them, in the very, very short paragraph, a lot of the dialogue that is alluded to being shared between them could be in either situation. So that's one interpretation of that. But it's very open-ended. You can interpret that in a good way, in a bad way, doesn't really matter. In both. So he goes off with the man and it's happy, and then the scene with the woman is him finally being dead and with her, with his mom. So the movie, and we'll touch on the movie, good ending. He goes off with the veteran. The veteran has what is presumably his wife and 2 children, and she hugs him and says, "Oh, we've been watching you for a while," and it wraps up all of these loose ends about the man thinking they were being followed and the boy seeing another little boy at one point, which does happen in the novel, but it's kind of implied to be a hallucination. It's a good ending. It's a decently good ending. I mean, the world is over and they're all going to die, but it's a good ending. In the graphic novel, the man gets shot by the bowman, okay? And there is a panel, let me see if I can even find it, where the focal point of the panel is the gloves of the bowman. So right here. It's the bowman's glove. I don't know that it's necessarily an actual bowman's glove, like for shooting a bow, but it is the glove of the bowman. And then when the boy meets up with the veteran not only makes a comment about how, wait, was the man you were with by the ports your father? Who the fuck would see them by the ports if not the bowman? But we also get a random panel that doesn't make much sense of the man's glove, and it's identical to the bowman's glove. And I thought that was going to be the boy reaching for his hand, because that's what happens, I believe, in the novel, is the boy reaches for the veteran's hand and walks with him. But then I realized that it's the same fucking glove. And then also something else, before the bowman shoots the father, we get a little fucking panel of his, like half of his face, and the veteran's face looks very similar. Again, it's a little sliver of a face, and then we only see the veteran from the side, but it looks very similar. So that tells me, because why the fuck would he be shooting at the father, that the guy's a cannibal, or with a group of cannibals. And the boy did not have a so nice ending, very, very nice ending in the graphic novel version. So, again, that's not really a negative. That's just a very interesting reinterpretation of it. I don't like it. I'm going to be so honest with you. I just don't like that reinterpretation of the ending. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. So, we're going to finally move on to the movie now. The movie's pretty good. Not as good as the book. Not even remotely as good. Better than the graphic novel, tell you that right now. Not even remotely as good as the book. But it's a pretty faithful interpretation of the book, and it's decently good. And there are some director or writer reinterpretations of material that are rather interesting. There's one or two scenes that I don't really fuck with, but it's very long. It's, I believe, a little over 2 hours, which, you know, for what the book is, that kind of makes sense because it's a decently long book spanning a decently long amount of time, like months, I believe. So, at least in my interpretation, it's months. It could be longer than that, depending on what you think. The acting in the movie is fucking immaculate. The kid, the kid who plays the kid, is one of the best child actors, at least in this movie, that I've ever seen in my life. Normally, it's very clear that a child is acting. Not in this case. The child does a great job playing the role of the boy in the book. I legitimately could not have imagined a better playing of this character. Even the minor characters as well. So the woman, the boy's mom, and then the road rat. The road rat is fucking great. I love the road rat. I love the voice that they gave him, the way that he acts. It's great. The mom, her acting, brilliant. It's all very, very, very good. The lighting and the set design is also fucking immaculate. The score of the movie, the low, like almost classical music is fucking immaculate. It is a decent movie on its own two legs. There were also some differences to the book that I really appreciated as well. So when the mom kills herself in the book, she says to the father, "I will not say goodbye to him," because she doesn't care anymore. But in the movie, it's a more drawn out thing. She goes, she bathes him, she hugs him, she kisses him, and then I believe it's later, maybe a couple of days later, she leaves. So I enjoyed that. The conversation between her and the man is drawn out longer. And then the scene with the house and the human livestock. In the book, they escape the house. They run out of the house, and they're hiding in a little, like, low dip in the land in the woods, and the man is holding the gun to the boy's head and conversating with himself about how, will I be able to do it? What do I do if the gun jams? Can I bash his head in with a rock? In the movie, they run upstairs, and they're locked in a bathroom. And the tension in that scene is just incredible because one of the women, and I really do appreciate, I talked to one of my friends about this. I really do appreciate that it's a woman because it shows that even though it's a man and a 10 to maybe 14-year-old boy, they're terrified, even though it's a woman, even though they generally would have power over her, physical power over her. If she sees them, if she knows that they're there, they're dead. And I really do appreciate that. And he is up there in the bathroom holding the gun to the boy's head. And the actor who plays the boy is doing an incredible job. He's crying. The man is like closing his eyes, expecting to have to pull the trigger. And then one of the people from the cellar, from one of the human livestock, gets out and starts fighting with the people. And he loses, or at least I would assume he loses. But it is done incredibly. It is done impeccably. I love that scene. I think that is debatably better than the original. I would go so far as to say that. And I know I said I don't really know how you'd make this plot better, but genuinely, I think that scene might in fact be better than the original novel. It's like the ending of the Mist movie versus the ending of the Mist story. I personally like the ending of the Mist story better. Tangent, but the Stephen King has said himself he wishes he thought of the ending for the movie for his original story. So, and yeah, that's it. And I believe that's all I have to talk about with you. Yeah, so longer video today. I'm not really sorry about that. More content for you, I guess, if you really care about the fucking road and the graphic novel adaptation in the movie. This is your video. Um, as always, my opinions are my opinions and my opinions alone. I would highly recommend you read this book. Read the fucking book. Read the book. Read the goddamn book. Okay? It is one of the best pieces of literature that I have ever read in my goddamn life. You are doing yourself a disservice not reading this book. Read the fucking book. It is brilliant. Again, my favorite book. I don't think I will ever read something that I enjoy more. I'm just saying that, putting that out there right now. But yeah, please, for the love of fucking Christ, go read the book and form your own fucking opinions. Holy shit. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I always do my best to respond to comments. I enjoy engaging with my audience, limited though it is. I mean, again, 129 people ain't fucking pennies. It's a shit ton of people to be subscribed to a YouTube channel. Just in terms of the modern internet and numbers, it's small. I'm fine with that. I just like interacting with people. If you have something nice to say, drop it. If you dislike something about the style of my videos, something I said, disagree with me, blah, 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 drop that as a comment as well. We can have a polite discussion about it. If you dislike the video, but tell me why you dislike the video. Anything else? No. I think that's it. See ya.